They called him the future greatest star of the NBA. But in just a few years, he lost almost everything. What was really behind the famous time zone story? Why do NBA veterans still call Marvin Barnes the most unfulfilled talent of his generation? And what little-known fact at the end of this story makes you believe his destiny could have turned out completely differently? Make sure to watch this video to the end. When Marvin Barnes was only 37 years old, his life was cut short so early that many basketball fans couldn't believe it for a long time. The man once called one of the most gifted players of his generation passed away without ever coming close to the legacy experts predicted for him. His name gradually transformed from a symbol of greatness into one of the saddest reminders of how an incredible talent can vanish almost before the eyes of the entire league. Today, young fans rarely remember Marvin Barnes, but those who followed basketball in the 70s remember a completely different man. A tall, powerful, incredibly technical forward who seemed not to notice opponents under the basket. Many specialists were certain they were looking at a future superstar capable of changing the balance of power in professional basketball. Some even said his natural talent surpassed the abilities of many players who later entered the Basketball Hall of Fame. Everything looked as if the road to greatness was wide open to him. Millions of dollars, the cheers of the stands, contracts, fame. It seemed long years of a bright career and a place among legends lay ahead. Instead, his story turned into one of the most tragic in the entire history of American basketball. Most often, when people remember Marvin Barnes, they immediately talk about drug addiction. And indeed, it played a huge role in the destruction of his career. However, it would be too simple to reduce the entire story to just that. Behind the loud headlines lay much more. The environment, character, decisions made at the most crucial moments of life, the atmosphere of professional basketball in those years. All of this gradually accumulated into a chain of events from which it became almost impossible to escape. The most amazing thing is that fate gave him more than once the chance to change everything. There were moments when it seemed he was making a comeback. Coaches started believing in him again. Clubs were ready to take a risk one more time. Fans hoped to see the old Marvin. But every time, something happened that threw him backward again. In this story, there are quite a few episodes that today seem almost unbelievable. Some of them are so unusual that for a long time they were perceived as ordinary basketball legends. But most of these events actually happened. That is why the story of Marvin Barnes still causes so much debate among NBA veterans. Some consider him the prime example of unfulfilled talent. Others are sure that no one could have coped with what he had to go through. And some are convinced that just a few different decisions could have completely changed his destiny. And at the end of this account, I will show a little-known fact that even old-school NBA fans rarely recall. It is precisely this fact that makes many former players and coaches say that Marvin Barnes' story very well could have ended quite differently. But before understanding how one of the most talented basketball players of his time ended up in such a situation, we need to return to where it all just began. After all, the main question arises: how did a man with such an incredible gift manage to climb to the very peak in the first place? Marvin Barnes was born on July 27, 1952, in Providence, Rhode Island. The neighborhood where his childhood passed was hardly a calm place for a future sports star. Many teenagers around him faced crime, poverty, and a constant struggle for survival. For most of them, the chances of breaking out of this environment were very slim. But already back then, Marvin possessed something that set him apart from the rest: a basketball talent that was impossible to ignore. He was unusual even by the standards of his peers. Tall height, long arms, excellent coordination, and an amazing lightness in his movements, allowed him to do things on the court that seemed impossible for a player of his dimensions. He fought under the basket with equal confidence, finished fast breaks, and felt comfortable in physical contact. Coaches quickly realized they had an athlete of a completely different level before them. During his studies at Central High School, Barnes turned into the main star of Rhode Island high school basketball. Not only parents and students came to his games, but also university scouts, perfectly understanding that such players appear extremely rarely. Every new game only strengthened his reputation. It seemed there were no opponents he could not outplay. Unsurprisingly, soon the best university programs in the country began fighting for the right to invite Marvin. Ultimately, he chose Providence College, a decision that became important not only for himself, but for the entire history of that basketball program. It was right here that his talent fully unfolded. Barnes very quickly became the team leader. His statistics impressed even experienced specialists. He consistently scored points, confidently collected rebounds, and completely controlled the game near the basket. Every season he grew stronger, and opponents increasingly built their defense solely around attempts to stop him. The real breakthrough happened in the 1973-74 season. Together with the Providence Friars, Marvin reached the NCAA Final Four, an achievement that forever remained one of the brightest pages in the university's history. Barnes was named the Regional Player of the Year and entered the ranks of the strongest basketball players in the National Collegiate Championship. Now, his name was known far beyond Rhode Island. It was then that another detail appeared that accompanied him for almost his entire career. The nickname Bad News Barnes stuck to Marvin. Some associated it with his aggressive style of play, after which opponents truly had a hard time. Others said it reflected his tough character and readiness to push forward through any situation. Whatever the real reason was, the nickname turned out to be surprisingly symbolic. Back then, it sounded formidable and even spectacular, but years later, many remembered it with a completely different meaning. By the time he graduated from college, specialists practically did not argue about his future. Most were certain that Marvin Barnes would become one of the new superstars of professional basketball. He was called a unique combination of physical power, natural talent, and basketball intellect. Some scouts said the market had not seen players like him for many years. That is why, when the time for a professional career arrived, a real battle began for the right to sign Barnes. And no one back then could even imagine that along with immense fame, the first alarming signals were already quietly approaching his life, soon to change everything. Professional basketball in the mid-70s was experiencing an unusual period. Two strong leagues, the NBA and the ABA, existed simultaneously. A real war for the best players was waging between them. Clubs offered huge contracts for those times, trying at any cost to secure young stars. It was at this exact moment that Marvin Barnes found himself among the most coveted basketball players in the country. In the 1974 ABA draft, he was selected second overall. Almost simultaneously, the ABA club Spirits of St. Louis also acquired his rights. Instead of calmly accepting the first offer, Barnes found himself at the center of a loud confrontation between the two leagues. Each of them was certain that this particular forward could change the future of the franchise. The winner of this struggle was the ABA. The management of the Spirits of St. Louis offered Marvin a contract that looked fantastic for a young player. At 22 years old, he got the opportunity to earn money that most athletes of that time could only dream of. It was a sign of how highly his potential was valued. Expectations were met almost immediately. Barnes did not look like a rookie getting used to the professional level. On the contrary, it created the impression that he had been playing among the best for a long time. He confidently scored points, won battles under the boards, and was not afraid of the most experienced opponents at all. His game combined power, speed, and amazing confidence. It seemed he knew exactly what he would do a few seconds before receiving the ball. He finished his rookie season in the ABA with impressive statistics, more than 24 points and nearly 16 rebounds per game on average. Such numbers were incredible even for established stars. Following the season, Marvin made the All-Rookie team and was recognized as one of the top debutants in the entire professional league. But it was not just about the numbers. Fans adored him for his spectacular basketball. He could dominate under the basket and a few seconds later finish a rapid attack with an explosive slam dunk. His physical data allowed him to do things that other tall players simply could not reach. Many specialists seriously stated that in a few years, Barnes would become the face of professional basketball. However, even then, the first alarming signals began to appear. They were almost lost against the backdrop of his brilliant play. But inside the team, they were noticed more and more often. Marvin did not like submitting to strict discipline. He regularly violated routines, argued with coaches, and made decisions that put club management in an extremely awkward position. One of the most famous stories was an episode before a game when the team was waiting for his arrival, and Barnes himself suddenly announced he had no intention of flying out with everyone else. Later, this story turned almost into a legend, although behind the loud jokes lay a much more serious problem. For some, he was a bright eccentric who lived by his own rules. For others, a man gradually losing control over his career. Teammates recalled that Marvin's mood could change literally within a few hours. One day he looked completely focused and played a magnificent match, and the next day he became a completely different person. Back then, many explained this by the peculiarities of his character. No one yet understood that processes might be hiding behind this, which very soon would begin destroying not only his career, but his entire life. From the outside, it seemed small problems were easy to fix. After all, Barnes's talent was so vast that many were ready to turn a blind eye to almost everything. But it was precisely during this period that a danger appeared near him which proved far stronger than any opponent on the basketball court. Very soon, an environment began forming around Marvin that, in those years, was considered an almost familiar part of professional sports. In the mid-70s, in the ABA, parties, alcohol, and prohibited substances were far more widespread than many are willing to admit today. A young player who had received a large contract and instantly become a celebrity just months prior found himself right in the center of this atmosphere. At first, it seemed everything was under control. Barnes continued to demonstrate outstanding play, regularly scoring points and dominating under the basket. Fans saw only bright matches, and club management preferred not to make a big issue out of individual incidents. As long as the player delivered results, many were ready to overlook his behavior off the court. But gradually, the changes became more noticeable. Marvin missed team events more and more often, showed up late for practices, and sometimes appeared in a state where coaches simply did not recognize the man who, until recently, was considered a paragon of incredible natural talent. Teammates recalled that his mood could shift within a few hours. One day he was the life of the team, and the next, he practically talked to no one. Management tried to influence the situation. Coaches, managers, and people who sincerely wanted to help talked to him. Everyone understood they were dealing with a player capable of becoming the face of the entire league. But any conversations yielded only a short-term effect. After a while, everything repeated itself. The most amazing thing lay elsewhere. Even when problems grew more serious, Barnes's talent did not disappear anywhere. He could still step onto the court and play a game after which opponents only spread their hands in bewilderment. It seemed nature had endowed him with such a reserve of abilities that he continued playing at the highest level despite his own lifestyle. This exact thing created a dangerous illusion. Many convinced themselves that Marvin would surely pull through if he only changed his habits slightly. In reality, however, addiction had already begun driving his decisions. And soon, it led to events after which even Barnes's most devoted supporters wondered for the first time. Would this incredible talent ever be able to fulfill all that he was given? Despite all the troubles, fate gave Marvin one more chance. After the ABA-NBA merger, he ended up in the strongest league in the world, first with the Detroit Pistons, and later he got the chance to play for the legendary Boston Celtics. For most players, this would have been the fulfillment of a dream. Next to him were basketball players already considered stars, and coaches still believed Barnes could return to his previous level. Sometimes he genuinely showed why he was valued so highly. In isolated games, Marvin looked like that unstoppable forward once considered the future face of American basketball. But good games grew increasingly rare. Off-court problems took over again, and the club's trust gradually ran out. It was during this period that a story emerged which later became one of the most famous NBA legends. Before the team's flight, Barnes was informed that the airplane was leaving at 8 o'clock, to which he calmly replied, "I can't. At 8 o'clock, I'll still be in a different time zone." This phrase spread across basketball America and turned into a joke. Many laughed at his strange behavior, but behind the funny story lay a far from cheerful reality. More and more often, Marvin's actions were the consequence of losing control over his own life. People discussed the funny incidents, while his career, meanwhile, was rapidly collapsing. Very soon, clubs stopped seeing Barnes as a player they could rely on. Teams no longer wanted to take risks, no matter how great his talent was. His career began to fade rapidly. Along with basketball came the loss of money, fame, and his accustomed life. Attempts to start over were made more than once, but new obstacles arose every time. His body, having endured immense strain for years, gradually gave up. Former teammates later confessed it was hard for them to watch one of the most talented players of his generation literally vanish before their eyes. Many were certain, if help had come earlier, the story could have turned out completely differently. On September 8, 1989, Marvin Barnes's life was cut short. He was only 37 years old. For a man once considered the future superstar of world basketball, this proved to be an incredibly early finale. But even decades later, his name continues to be remembered not only for his brilliant play, but also as one of the most tragic examples of unfulfilled talent in NBA history. Many league veterans said that in terms of natural attributes, Barnes was second to none among the greatest forwards of his era. And that precisely was the little-known fact mentioned at the beginning. It was not a lack of talent that stopped Marvin, but a chain of decisions and circumstances that proved stronger than his gift.